And 3, 2, 1. Welcome to LibernetLIVE. Libernet is a project that attempts to marry blockchain and books in the attempt to liberate and emancipate all of human knowledge. And I am joined gratefully tonight by a friend of mine, Jeffrey Almond. How are you doing, Jeffrey?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm good. Yes, I'm good. It's not as sunny this weekend, which is kind of sad, but the pub garden's open next week, which is pretty exciting. And oh my God, I mean, when you think my mum was just to get on subject, my mum was watching like BBC News yesterday, and apparently they were covering Prince Philip's death for all day, like 12 hours of non-stop coverage on Prince Philip. It was unbelievable. Like, rest in peace and all of that. But like, I mean, I don't know. I don't think you have to be an anti-royalist to sort of see that's a little bit. I mean, like, how on earth are we going to react when the Queen dies? You know, it's like,
God. Going to be a week long, just memorials. Each of us are going to have to stand outside for a full 24 hours and just clap like we did for the NHS for those like 2 weeks at the start of the pandemic. Yeah. We are going to all have to pitch in maybe about 88p. I don't know, however old she is when she dies, that much in pence to fund a state funeral for her.
I think she'll be in triple figures by the time she dies. I mean, I think so. I mean, Prince Philip was 99, for God's sake, you know. It's so funny. I was talking to I ran into an old friend of mine. Well, he's not really an old friend. He just sort of he was just an illustrator, and he was talking about, like, you know, the craziness of the royalists and the sort of arguments. You know, like, oh, but it brings in good tourism. And it's like, well, why can't we just replace that with something else? And like, you know, like, I think he asked his mother, who was like quite a royalist. He was like, would it be good to have a royal family on Mars if we colonize Mars? And then she was like, well, of course not. And then he was like, well, why do we have it on Earth? You know, it's like,
I do not, for the life of me, I have never gotten those arguments saying, oh, it's good for tourism. Yeah, the buildings are good for tourism. That's what France figured out when they beheaded their royal family. I'm not saying let's kill people, obviously.
Yeah.
Like, maybe in Minecraft, but France doesn't have a royal family, and yet the French pronunciations. I haven't studied French for like 7 years.
Yes.
But the Arc de Triomphe, the Louvre, the Bastille, all of these monuments from the time when France had a royal family, they're still there. They are famous throughout history. They don't have a royal family.
Yeah.
Those places do bring in tourists to look at them, to fund their maintenance, to get revenue for the state. But they don't need a royal family to do that. And we don't need a royal family to do that for Windsor Castle or Buckingham Palace or the Tower of London or any of these places.
Of course. This is the, I think I'm writing this in an essay I've been commissioned to do, where it is just sort of about, like, we come up with these arguments, but they're never actually, these arguments seem to be based on something rational or something we thought out, but like, there's obviously that background of ideology. It's always like, this is ideological, and really you're just you're really trying to cover up this kind of thing. You're just sort of uncomfortable with things being done differently because this is what you know, which is exactly like, this is what the whole thing that I hope we're going to talk about anyway, and sort of in regards to, like, you know, well, mainly we'll discuss the dollar and all of the heroic things that it's done. And so I mean, like, and this sort of brings me to, like, the kind of thing that I'm sort of thinking about at the moment when we're sort of thinking about, like, systems of monetary distribution that are they just exist, and we just accept that they exist in the exact way that they are. And even if better tools come along to help, there's no real consensus, because it's not ideologically driven, because we don't know how to look at, you know. And yeah, I wanted to say, because you've done a bit of, like, excuse me, done a bit of sort of research, research and sort of preparation for this sort of thing. I'd like to sort of hear, you know, your sort of personal takes on, you know, certain scandals relating to the dollar. You know, I mean, one of the ways I got this kind of gig is we were sort of, you know, me and Dylan were just talking about, you know, how the US dollar coerces third world country, you know, the US coerces third world countries into using it and making it the standard, even though it's not based on anything. And you have some Middle Eastern countries, I think Libya, if I'm saying that, yeah, Libya tried to return to the gold standard, and a lot of sort of radical theorists believe that, maybe not even radical, a lot of people just believe that that's probably why America were like, can't do that, can't do that, can't do that. So yeah, I'd like to hear your 2 cents on that, actually.
Well, yeah, it's not just the dollar, but it's a lot of both post-colonial and neo-colonial countries. Like, it's a bit off topic, but take Sierra Leone, for example. In Africa, it's, as a country per capita, it's one of the richest countries in the world for natural resources, but it's one of the like 5 or 10 poorest countries in the world for GDP per capita, because the debt traps that they are in due to American diplomacy and Chinese diplomacy and the different interactions between them through history and former colonial powers like France and this country as well. They have lost the rights to mine their own natural resources. They've lost the right to profit from their own natural resources. It's like with another example, Namibia. I believe it's Namibia. I wrote an essay about this, I should really know it. But Namibia used to be known as German Southwest Africa, I think.
Right.
It was it's the place where a genocide occurred, perpetrated by the German military. And to this day, it took over 80 years just to get an apology from the German government for that genocide. An entire ethnic group in Namibia was wiped out, another one massively reduced. And Namibians today, I think it's something like 86 or 87% of the land in the country is owned by Germans, still to this day.
Right.
And there's a lot of this kind of stuff going on in Latin America as well. With Bolivia, for example, is probably the most recent example, where the CIA, and it all sounds quite conspiratorial the moment you mentioned the CIA, but, you know, the American government gave their backing to Agnes, I'm going to say. Is it Jennifer Agnes or something like that? Janine Agnes.
Yeah.
They gave their backing to her. They gave her loans. They gave her diplomatic support, and they overthrew the legitimately elected government of Bolivia through her. It's like what they're trying to do with Juan Guaido in Venezuela.
Yeah.
So through finances, through economics, through an international interaction based on currency and resources, America definitely does do a lot of damage to less wealthy countries.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, for one, I just want to comment on how shocking it is that this isn't in this sort of the Western public consciousness anyway, because I don't know, like I don't want to just say that it's like a white thing, but like it really seems to be like a kind of I don't know, it's not in the public consciousness at all, and I mean that's sort of been changing over the past 10 years. I actually watched an interview with Quentin Tarantino where in 2013. And he makes this very interesting comment where he says, slavery isn't talked about in this country. And it's weird because it's much more talked about now. And to hear him sort of say that, it's like, oh, things have sort of changed over the past 10 years in terms of discussion. I'm not saying that this is, anything's improved or anything's, changed in that way, but it's certainly interesting to see sort of discussion opening up. And I mean, when you hear about land ownership and sort of, is it redlining? Is it redlining in America and sort of urban neighborhoods in comparison, and sort of the the revenue that's being brought in. Because when you hear sort of people like Morgan Freeman say, stop talking about racism and it will go away, I think that's the strangest, and I've really realized in recent times how strange that argument is. In terms of because in terms of like actual, because I think someone like really wonderfully explained, you can actually have a society where no individual is actually at all racist. You could wipe it from their minds, and the structural racism would still exist. That's something that isn't really it's not really considered. Like, so a lot of people don't consider it. It doesn't have to be individual beliefs and attitudes. It is actually the way in which architecture is structured that signifies the sort of the echoes and ghosts of the actual racist tendencies that came before. And we can't just ignore those things and say, oh, let's just stop talking about it. It's a very strange argument to me. It's a very strange argument.
I think the difference between individual and structural racism is like, let's say you have a building and there's a metal detector at the entrance, and just after the metal detector, or just before the metal detector, there's someone who, if you go into the building and you're not white, they punch you in the gut, right? So you're not white, you go into the building, the guy punches you in the gut. You keep going into the metal detector, and because you're not white, it vaporizes you, right? Taking away, just erasing individual racism takes away the guy who's punching you in the gut on entrance, but it doesn't take away the metal detector. That structural racism is still going to be there. And also, when people talk about how racism, sex, any kind of bigotry is just an individual problem, they're missing the point, because where do these individual cases of racism, sexism, transphobia, homophobia, etc. come from? They don't just appear out of thin air. They happen because the system we live in is designed to not only allow but encourage those views in order to keep down people who are the victims of those views.
I don't even necessarily have to rely on the idea that there are bad actors that are powerful. I don't even that most definitely is true in regards to maybe, into a lot of administrations in the American government that are allied with very strange organizations, which I won't mention in detail. However, I don't even need to rely on the argument that there are bad actors to sort of understand that transphobia, racism, and sexism is encouraged. I don't think you need that argument that you're being trickled down this sort of. I think it is literally embedded in our conceptual structures and how we relate to each other. When you hear about AI facial recognition softwares, not recognizing African American people as much as white people, and saying, "Oh, sorry, that's just the way the computers are designed." And I'm like, See, I don't believe that anyone. I think it was Google, but I'm not believing that anyone at Google was, plotting some evil crime to make this happen. I think it's a literal, almost involuntary thing that we just embody, and how our cognition operates, in how we relate to things, and based on structures that came before, that leads to this sort of thing. Would you agree with me?
Yeah, definitely. It's like with Twitter, when you're just scrolling through Twitter on your phone or on computer, and there's a picture that's above the preview size, it crops it so that it sees only what the Twitter algorithm sees as the important information in that picture. The thing is, when you start putting large pictures of a white person and a black person together, and you put that and you post that on Twitter, the algorithm immediately defaults showing in the preview, the cropped preview of the picture that you see on your timeline. It defaults to showing and zooming in on the white face, and it cuts out the black face until you click on the picture to see the full image. And that's because the Twitter algorithm, when it sees black faces, it doesn't judge it as a proper face.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. I guess to sort of bring it back to to sort of monetary systems. I think it's the same thing in regards to how sort of how we embody these, how we sort of embody these prejudices almost involuntarily. I mean, and I sort of like to sort of I wrote an article a couple of weeks ago about, or, yeah, a couple of weeks ago now, about sort of how monetary distribution and sort of our arguments don't even have to be left and right wing. I like left and right wing sort of organized to sort of realize universal threats and universal enemies that we can combat. You know, in regards to like like hedge funds and Wall Street, and how the dollar treats how the dollar is being used to sort of manipulate systems in third world countries. This is something that I'm very aware of in regards to sort of understanding that left-wingism and right-wingism is based on a certain distribution, but you don't need to appeal to sort of left-wing arguments to sort of actually say, oh, these hedge funds are fucking assholes, the dollar's being mistreated, like Biden's quantitative easing and obviously probably giving it to the banks, both libertarians on the right and maybe leftists like us on the left are where else would we be? Where else would we be? Oh, we'll be up northwest. No, down the road. No. So, it's just sort of, we can both agree, which so surprised me so much about GameStop. You had people like Ben Shapiro and who else? Who was the other one? Tucker Carlson, of all people, saying, why is short selling legal? It doesn't benefit the community. These Redditors are doing a really interesting job and we wish them the best. And I'm like, what? As a leftist, I'm finding myself like kind of surprised, but then, which is what I find interesting about sort of, these new sort of ways in which we can sort of, we can sort of have our differences of leftists and rightists, but when we want to actually band together and be like, well, these hedge funds shouldn't have nearly as much power as they have, and the rightists will also agree that they're not actually benefiting the community at all. They're not creating revenue or market or whatever you want to call it. It's actually a good thing that we can give power back to the little man. And this is this is really interesting to me. And I guess the people, like who's left over, like the normies, I'd say, like the people that are just like, oh well, Robinhood is a private company. It has the right to block GameStop and AMC's stock purchases. We can't, it's what happens. It's what happens, and they sort of eat everything that SMBC will throw at them in regards to, disrupting the system and, manipulating the market and all of that. And I think it just comes down to ideology in the end, and how we are conditioned to believe that the system we are in now, even though it's been this system's only been around for like, I don't know, 10, 20 years in the current format, if that, it's always changing, is like, oh, this is the way it has to be. And it's so strange.
Yeah, I think the thing about the whole Robin Hood thing is it's really illuminating in the sense of where the priorities of companies like this lie. You can it's like it was created to democratize stock transactions, but once people found out that they could start gaming the system and hurt the bottom line of hedge fund managers and other people who are actually powerful and influential in the sector, they shut it down immediately. It's not about democratizing it, it's about getting a commission from more trades. And
exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's, and it's so startling to have people still so naive in regards to these hedge funds and how they operate when we think about the 2008 economic recession, something, and something that both, like even like reasonable, I don't know, reasonable libertarians, if you could call, if you want to give that sort of term, will also say, like, why did we bail out the banks after they were the actors that caused this this bubble and then this collapse that hurt a lot of vulnerable communities and households all across the world. And it's just certainly a very, very strange thing. And when we, yeah, it's just when we're talking about, you know, how best to improve our systems, it's like a lot of people who just eat up the, you know, the evening news, can't see past the end of their noses. You know, they can't even look at other countries which are very similar to us in social, you know, social norms and values. Like, I don't know, Iceland, for example. It's not like you go to Iceland and then there's like some sort of like, it's like a culture. I mean, you know, a culture, because it's like these people are pretty, you know, that, you know, we share a lot of similar norms and these people, you know, clearly like they held the bankers accountable in the way that United Kingdom and America did not at all. And it's like, we don't need this radical shift in consciousness to even address this. If we just said, yep, these people are clearly, you know, the root of the problem, let's put them in prison, you know, and of course that, you know, that doesn't happen because for whatever reason you want to give.
I mean, I think the reason is pretty simple. The largest donors to the Conservative Party are bankers. They're large corporations who benefit from the things that banks and hedge funds do. It's the same story in America. A lot of the donors are banks. A lot of the donors are bankers individually. A lot of them are military-industrial complex companies. Raytheon, Boeing, and Halliburton as well. And in fact, now I think about it, I'm not even sure if Halliburton still exists, but you get the point, you know? It's the fact that they create, it does still exist, they give money to politicians so that they can get elected on the basis that those politicians are going to benefit them. And that is also helped by the fact that the media also benefits from this. A lot of media companies are owned by the same parent company as certain other companies that might donate to political campaigns. Rupert Murdoch is one of the most famous examples of this, obviously.
Maybe the most, yeah.
Yeah, with News of the World and Fox News and Sky News as well.
The Sun.
The Sun, trading influence for power. That's the entire reason why Tony Blair was elected the first time. And the famous headline, "Give Labour a Chance," you know?
It's very, it's eerie. It is certainly eerie, and one that we just sort of, you know, one that we, you know, one that is so based on, you know, how sort of transactions are taking place. You know, when we think about how bankers actually have so much power that they do, you know, I like to sort of think about it sort of social action, so like sort of micro-sociologically. You know, I think about an individual and I think about their experience. You know, I'm a big fan of phenomenology, you know, and I think just having that sort of thought process really helps, you know, thinking less about these sorts of abstract systems that we must compel ourselves to, and more thinking about my experience as a human being. And my experience as a human being is I want to get a coffee and a croissant, so I'm going to go to Costa and get it because it's available to me. Or, you know, I want somewhere to put my money, so I'm going to use a bank because the bank is just up the road from me. And I like to think of that. But if I were to think, and what's important is that, you know, what's important is comparing that to sort of conceptual structures. So for example, if I'm offered a new way of doing this, for example, I'm offered a place, I can put my money in cryptocurrency in Coinbase, and Coinbase were to, you know, they aren't a bank in the same way that they, you know, they loan, and then they loan, and then they get paid to a company, then that company puts them into the bank, and then they go loan, and then it keeps going, and then the bank makes tenfold the amount of money that I've put into the bank, and then it has a fractional reserve from the money that they actually keep that I can take out. Obviously, it's much more liquid than that, and it doesn't work exactly like that. But you know, when I think about a bank that does this with my money and gives me no real information on this, and I have to sort of find it through alternative news sources, and then when I'm offered a company that doesn't do this and is very open about how it uses the money and very transparent, and I get much higher returns, I mustn't let the conceptual ideological instinct in me to say, oh, that's a bit risky. Oh, that's not how things are done. Oh, that's, that's a bit fragile, or the arguments, oh, Bitcoin's for criminal activity. This is for the rest of it, because it's clearly, it's clearly like this very, very obvious smear campaign to say, oh, the people have power to do what they want with their earnings. And that's all it comes down to. And of course, the resorts are always, oh, it's going to encourage deviant bad behavior, as if to say, like, people can't be trusted. They must be kept down and be institutionally guided by institutions that they clearly have no control over and are just sort of funneled in through sort of, I don't know, ideological systems to just say, oh, to say, oh, you're dependable, you're reliable, you have good customer service when I call you on the phone, and I get adverts on the TV about you, and I don't get adverts about Coinbase or Nexo or block, all the rest of it. So, I think it is as simple as that. I don't think it's any like complicated. I don't think it is that at all.
Yeah, it's interesting because that whole argument that, Bitcoin is only for cryptocurrencies in general, only for criminal activity, they're going to, if you buy any Bitcoin, you're immediately like psychically compelled to spend it on 10 ounces of Mexican black tar heroin or something. I don't get that, because I have problems with Bitcoin. I have problems with cryptocurrencies, right? I am alarmed by the volatility of cryptocurrency markets. I do kind of laugh at memes that are like, this morning I woke up and I bought Bitcoin for $23,000 and sold it when it was like $22,000. Jokes about how it goes up and down within seconds of you even looking at it. But to say that it's like some kind of devil on your shoulder that immediately guides you towards criminal activity is a bit ridiculous, because no one's denying that Bitcoin is used for dark web transactions and shady deals and stuff like that. You can go on the dark web and hire an assassin and all this sort of stuff. So is normal money. So is cash.
Bingo.
And unlike technology, like facial recognition AI software or self-driving cars, unlike stuff like that, Bitcoin is ones and zeros. Bitcoin is just a thing. It's not, as far as I'm aware, it's not some kind of decision-making software that's made by fallible people who have inbuilt subconscious prejudices that result in black faces not being seen as, actual
as
complete faces, and not that, buying Bitcoin isn't going to result in a self-driving car running over a black man on the street because the algorithm written into it judges him to be a criminal.
Oh my god, that's a scary thought. That's a scary thought. That's something something I didn't think about before. I mean, Jesus, we could be, Jesus Christ. And this is obviously like, this made me think about the sort of talk I was having with someone about morality and kind of our strange sort of search. I don't know, especially with sort of, I don't know, the sort of the rather than decentralization, but this ultimate centralization of systems to sort of say, as if to say, oh, we'll have one government take care of everything, this sort of thing, which obviously scares the living shit out of me. But because of because of this sort of weird grand search, this sort of Sam Harris-esque search for morality, we'll find the objective morality and then we'll stick to it. And that's so scary to me when you talk about those sorts of things, with self-driving. When I mean by self-driving cars, like sort of making sort of objectively moral decisions or whatever, and how how fucking dangerous that is, you know? And that's that, but that kind of plays into what we're talking about, I think, when we're talking about, you know, this sort of unanimity of all systems, you know, and obviously we're not even thinking about the fact that most of the time it's used by force, and most of the time it's used by, you know, oh, you know, you're like US dollar, you know, we got this, guys, you know, it's like, well, no, we don't like that. No, you know, with the country, sort of Sierra Leone, I can't say the name, Sierra Leone, yeah, and you know, and all of that, it's very alarming. It's very alarming. Yeah, really, it's just really quite, yeah, which is what interests me so much about this blockchain or whatever, and the sort of, and how promising it could be, despite, you know, all of the issues that it has, which is the same for everything, which has no issues. But, you know, it's fascinating when we think about, I don't know, these sorts of attempts to sort of overthrow the system, sort of using the same tools as the system in the same way that, you know, like, I don't know, sort of peaceful protests at Wall Street, and how it didn't create a dent in what they do. They were probably like looking down from their skyscrapers and their high rises with popcorn. Like, wow.
No, they literally were. There are pictures of Occupy Wall Street protesters, you know, protesting, sitting out, camping out in front of buildings, in front of banks, and there's video of them getting brutalized by police officers while bankers look down from balconies with champagne glasses in their hands. Like,
yeah, right.
But the thing is, with a complicit and implicit, well, is implicit the right word? But with a complicit media like the one we have,
yeah,
at least in the Western world,
yeah,
one that, mind you, is just as propaganda heavy as anything that comes out of North Korea or China, quite frankly. But with a media like this, we're not going to get anything done because the information that people need in order to better their own lives doesn't get out. It's in the best interest of the people who are in control of the media. For example, in this country, 6 billionaires own 80% of the media in this country.
Yeah, I forgot the statistic. That's alarming.
Yeah. The thing is, if we wanted to get a Labour government, for example, not one run by Keir Starmer, an actual Labour government, if we wanted one of those in this country, we would need to first do something about the media, because a good example of this is the Panama Papers in 2016. I mentioned them to you last night, didn't I?
Yeah.
Please.
I read what you showed me, but please remind me again, because it was yeah.
Oh, yeah. The Panama Papers was a leak of, was it 11.5 million leaked documents that talked about over 200,000 offshore entities and had a list of all the clients of those entities. And in fact, it was a revelation of the fact that the rich people of the world, are conspiring together to hoard their money in offshore accounts. It was a story for a day in the mainstream media, and then it was silent the next day. No one talked about it for months. Barely anyone talks about it anymore. And then a year later, one of the journalists who wrote the story died in a car bomb.
What a tragedy. What a strange coincidence.
What a strange coincidence. It's so sad that her car just decided to explode. And
I know she was writing a story as well. How unfortunate.
Christ. It's just,
oh my God.
And still today, this was when it came out, when the Panama Papers came out, it was a massive moment for me, at least. It was a huge moment. But nowadays, when I mention the Panama Papers, to anyone in a conversation. Like, oh, what was that? What's that? It's the biggest, one of the biggest document leaks in history. And it shows a global, worldwide conspiracy to hoard wealth and avoid taxes. And one of the journalists was assassinated. And still no one knows about it. It toppled governments, plural. It toppled the Icelandic government when it came out because people, you know, were happy with their government in Iceland. And then it came out that the prime minister was one of the names, his name was one of the names that was mentioned in the client list in the Panama Papers. And there were violent protests and he was kicked out of office in disgrace.
My God.
And nothing happened in this country anywhere near that level. And people in the media stopped talking about it after a couple hours, and then everyone forgot about it.
This is obviously what I think. This is where I sort of think of phenomena. When I think of when I hear these stories, my only reaction is just paralysis, because I'm just like, what the fuck am I supposed to do about that? And then I sort of like to return to phenomenological encounters when we talk, and you can talk about, the powers to assassinate, the powers to control media, all the rest of it. And these are obviously very, very powerful tools for these people. And I need to read more about this fucking thing. But at the end of the day, they're still operating on a monetary system. And that monetary system is still dependent on certain beliefs and practices that individual people with individual lives and just, ordinaries want to get on with themselves like me have to occupy themselves with. And if I were to find a system that were to get rid of that, then no assassination can take place. And I like to think very optimistically. And I think of two things that keep me very optimistic, and there are problems with these two optimistic things, but I'll get. One is piracy. And piracy hasn't been, they can't get rid of it. It's been like 20 years now, maybe 30 years that piracy's existed in the organized way it has. They can't do it. They've wanted to fucking try. I can pirate whatever the hell I want. Yeah. And this obviously, when you think about, the response of, Spotify and Netflix and Amazon Prime being sort of like ushering in, and because of convenience, they'll say, oh, well, this is easier than doing all of that. Yes, obviously, but one cannot deny the absolute power, like this brilliant anarchistic kind of response to that sort of those sort of regimes through piracy. And I think of the same thing when I think of what was the other thing I was going to say? When I think about just different ways of doing things that they can't touch. And I forgot the other thing I was going to say. Perhaps I was just going to say going to mention blockchain and say, in this sort of system, if I have a resource that's available to me, that's it. I believe that that banks and sort of centralized systems of power are going to create their own version of it and say, oh, this is a safer, more secure, more ideologically convenient cryptocurrency. And if that doesn't work, then I believe they'll try and illegalize it. But at the end of the day, they still need the consciousness of the people. And the other thing I was going to say, which is misinformation and conspiracy theories popping up everywhere. Now, I'm a bit of a Hegelian when I sort of think about this, because I don't think that this misinformation explosion that's happening on social media is actually a bad thing. I think it's a good start. I think I think it's a very muddy kind of infantile sort of beginning on sort of something that may turn into democratization of media. Obviously, I don't think it's a good system. Obviously, I don't think that. And you may disagree and have a good argument against this, but I don't think that it was. I don't think that misinformation, these sorts of these conspiracy theories are legitimate in any way. For example, I don't see vaccine conspiracies as important. I don't see flat Earth conspiracies as good. I don't see moon landing conspiracies as good. I don't see a lot of this as good. But I think, and this all I'm trying to say in regards to this is that I think if we think about how that might change the public consciousness in 20 years, there might be some interest. It might be interesting to sort of watch the shell break in terms of that, in terms of that process. Now, I saw you squint. When I said, and I want to hear what you said, because I want to hear what you have to say about that, because and yeah because
I don't think this explosion of misinformation is going to. I think it could, but it smacks a lot. That argument to me sounds a lot like saying Trump was an accelerationist. Making things worse in America is going to drive us towards, a communist revolution, so on. So I think I don't disagree that it's a possibility. I think it's very optimistic thinking, especially because in this country, at least, I trace the beginning of the explosion of misinformation on social media back to the Brexit referendum, where the Brexit campaign used companies such as Cambridge Analytica to start, spreading all this misinformation through memes and through questionnaires and surveys and little games, and they'd, get the information that they need from different people who were taking part in those things to tailor make adverts to them based on the things that they are interested in. And through that, effectively use misinformation to target them and change their mind. And I just think this idea that misinformation is going to lead to democratization of the media, it's an interesting concept, but when the misinformation is handled and spread by massive institutions that have a vested interest in seeing the opposite of what you want to see.
Yes,
I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's likely, at least.
I think I used the wrong word when I said misinformation. Perhaps I was sort of I sort of meant this kind of this sort of shift in sort of beliefs and sort of beliefs in kind of, I don't know, this is the ideological thing. I completely agree with everything you're saying, and once again I've lost I lost what I was going to talk about, but because it happens a lot. I completely agree with everything you're saying. God, I hate to forget what I was going to say. Misinformation was probably the wrong word. I just think in terms of that's it. In terms of, if anything, it is shifting the public consciousness to sort of, for example, 20 years ago, conspiracy theories were sort of seen as nut jobs, and now no one really believes the problem is people still rely on it because they need daddies to take care of them. The daddy will take care of it, like the government will take care of it, the market will take care of it, the church will take care of it. The dollar will take, the dollar or the appropriate money system will take care of it. But I've noticed, at least in the way people speak, people are very skeptical. And I'm not saying that this is an accelerationist process that's going to arrive at, I don't know, this sort of wonderful anarchistic, communistic, whatever. But I think if it was, if something optimistic was going to arrive, it was going to begin crawling and sort of babbling. It wasn't going to be like this kind of immediate waking up and like, oh, I get it now. People, it's like unplugging from the Matrix. You're going to have that scene where Neo, is like going crazy and vomits, and really shakes his belief system in the point where like, it's not like a clean transition. It's a very unclean transition. I'm not making the claim that vested interests are just going to lose power and everyone's going to go, oh, there's the Epstein Island attendees, let's get them all. I don't think that's going to, but I do think at the end of the day, like, shift in consciousness is very, as someone that really believes in phenomenology, that I think that sort of shift in sort of how I think about what the government does and how I think about these sorts of, how I think about these sorts of things and how I think about Hollywood. I mean, this is a big one as well. I watched Tom Cruise's interview by Oprah Winfrey, and Oprah Winfrey, she says, Tom Cruise is in the building, and you just have all of these like young middle-aged women or whatever. They're all just screaming. They just can't believe they're in the same building as Tom Cruise. And Tom Cruise is obviously a fucking nut job, and like, you know, probably on the psychopathic scale, and they are just hypnotized by him. And I look at that and I see it's so interesting to sort of see that, because I really think the attitude has shifted now. I don't think people see like these Hollywood actors in the same way at all. Especially now we have, you know, like, you know, sort of the things coming out about Epstein, and you know, say what you want, Ricky Gervais sort of being like sort of controlled opposition in regards to the Golden Globe sort of thing. And I'm sort of like, yeah, maybe he is, but like, I'm just saying that this shift in public consciousness is something very interesting. It's interesting, and it could be the beginning of something interesting, especially when we think about sort of decentralized systems such as blockchain, and different ways of doing work such as DAOs, which are decentralized autonomous organizations. Which I look at all of this and I think it's very interesting. There's a lot of a lot of things going on right now in regards to, you know, middlemaning and you know, the publishing industries and art collectors and you know, Twitter and, you know, the sort of social media apps that generate billions in revenue that we don't get. And we're already seeing like, you know, a shift in that. And these are sorts of and whereas before 20 years ago, I think it could have been very easy to say, oh, blockchain, you know, they could have branded it as the Goldstein, you know, like he's the this is the enemy or whatever. I don't think people buy from that as easily. I'm not saying people aren't as easily swayed by ridiculous information or that people are getting any smarter, but which is whatever. But it's interesting to me.
I do want to say most conspiracy theories are obviously wrong and they're quite easy to debunk. The one conspiracy theory I believe in is that birds aren't real.
Jeffrey, that's not a conspiracy theory.
It's fact.
It's been proved. That's why there are so many birds, you know, attending Prince Philip's. You know, they got to keep an eye on him, you know, for when they resuscitate him, when the cybernetic empire comes around. It's like, we will have Prince Philip to lead us all. I'm so sorry.
YouTube's good. Yeah. Magicians always release doves, you know, and like pigeons and stuff, because the government forces them to. They know too much.
That's why they kill them, like in the Prestige. Just like, this one. God. And obviously, this isn't to say that Prince Philip's death isn't sad, and you know, he was a father and he was a father and a husband and everything, and obviously, like, you know, no human death is that. My main humor comes from the coverage of it, and I think I think the coverage of Prince Philip's death is absolutely hilarious, and I don't know what's going to be the coverage when the Queen dies, you know, and it's interesting. I mean, this illustrator I met up with yesterday, he had a date with this Romanian girl, and it's very strange. A lot of Europeans are sort of very they sort of fetishize the royal family in a way that surprises me, considering they are normally republics and royal, you know, and their royal systems have little to no power if they even exist. And there's still sort of this oh, but Britain it's the crown and the jewels and the empire and the lion and Big Ben and all of that. And it's very interesting, you know, sort of. And when you come here and you sort of we think we've got monocles and pipes and we're all chimney sweeping, and we're actually just like screaming at the TV when the World Cup is is on, you know, which is next year, isn't it? Jesus Christ.
And the Euros are this year.
Oh, what the Euros? What? Yeah, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, it's the international European championships football, but it's just too much football, honestly. Just too much.
I almost got swept in. I almost got swept in because when England got to like the quarterfinal, I think it was the semi-finals. I forgot what it was, and I was just like, oh my god, you know, and it was, and this is the sort of thing. And when I see myself doing that, I kind of think of Slavoj Žižek with that McDonald's burger, because I think of how relentless of a social critic he is, and he's still swept in the ideology because he knows that it's enjoyable, and he knows that he knows that, and also he knows that he isn't responsible for sort of setting an example. What's brilliant about him is he's like, I'm not a role model, I'm not a hero, I just write stuff, you know, and I like that about him. He has a lot of integrity in ways that I really I really quite like. He's like, no, people he said like, students come up to me and say, what should I write my master's on? He's like, I don't fucking know. I don't give a shit, you know, like go away. I don't give a fuck about, you know. And I'm like, you know,
quote, what should I write in my master's thesis about? And he's like, I don't care, go kill yourself.
Yeah. I tried not to say that, but yes.
We're just quoting him. But like, I like a lot of things about Zizek, and there's a lot I don't like. For example, his transphobia, but also like the thing I like is the little speech he did about wisdom, where he was like,
"It's good."
I love that speech.
Yeah, really, really, really exciting.
I'm not going to recite the entire thing because it's 5 minutes. So
yeah, I think I could do it quite quickly. Actually, Zizek basically says that you can package any form of wisdom as some philosophical statement. So you can have with enough pathos. Yeah. So if you can have a guy like say like, oh, you know, you get some wise man say, oh, it's not about the infinite, it's about what's happening here. It's the cup of tea, it's the cigarette. And then you have another wise man say, oh, it's nothing about these sensory pleasures, it's about the eternal and the great beyond. Or you could say like, it's neither, or it's both, you know. And you know, if you do wrap it up in enough sort of like, you know, stringy beards and all the rest of it, we can actually like, you know, you can actually like, I think the main problem, I think it's fine to sort of have spiritual sort of things that sort of point you in nice directions, but when you're sort of masquerading that and you're sort of hiding a philosophical system behind that, that can be kind of like, it's very disingenuous, I think, you know. Yeah, we are on 55 minutes roughly, or 50 minutes roughly. It flies by. It does fly by. Yeah, I'm just thinking about anything that we may have missed. We've when we sort of the sort of center of focus with this, you know, was going to be sort of, you know, sort of about, you know, monetary system. I think we've covered quite a lot of it actually. Like, you know, the 2008 recession, hedge funds, US dollar being, you know, sort of a coerced third world country. I think, you know, and sort of tying it all. I mean, you know. I mean, but you've made some notes. Is there anything, you know, we don't have to wrap up immediately, but is there anything that you really would like to talk about that you've prepared for? And
there's nothing I prepared for, but there's one thing I was going to talk about, but I guess forgot to when I was speaking. Morgan Freeman's argument about race. I feel like it's been really badly misinterpreted by a lot of people. I think the thing is, his main point when he was talking is that we shouldn't identify each other by each other's race.
Yes, okay.
And by doing that, we have far less reason to judge each other by race. It's not, don't talk about racism, just, you know, out of sight, out of mind. If you're not thinking about it, it goes away. It's more like remove the foundations of racism, which are, I'm going to look at you as a white person. You are a white person. That's your entire value as a human, you know? And I feel like people are entirely misrepresenting that argument by saying, oh, what he's actually saying is, let's just stop talking about racism. If we don't think about it, then it gets solved.
Yeah.
And then other people who have their hearts in the right places say, well, no, that's a shit argument.
Yeah.
You don't get rid of. Yeah, it's like getting stabbed and saying, well, if I don't think about the stab wound, it'll go away, you know? It'll be fine. I'm not bleeding out.
Yeah.
But missing the point, because the point's been misrepresented to start with. It's a flawed basis for a debate, you know? That's just my take, my burning hot nuclear take.
Entire civilizations will fall. No. So, oh, wait. Yes, I mean, and you know, and this is the sort of, yeah, I think the same thing applies in some ways to sort of, you know, vested powers. You know, we mustn't, you know, when you know, we can't just simply say like, you know, let's just ignore. I mean, this is something I write about in my book, actually. You know, like, we can't just be anarchistic to everything and say like, you know, oh, let's ignore it all. Let's just go burn a building down. Let's go burn a police, you know, in a sort of same way. I mean, I actually use the sort of gangster as an example because I'm all about conceptual prejudices and like the sort of the chaining of concepts. And I think about sort of freeing ourselves from conceptual chains that we don't get to, that aren't helping us or that they don't give us good experiences or whatever. That's roughly what I'm talking about. And I think about, I have this idea of a gangster that ignores all social imperatives for money and power. So he sort of thinks that he's free, but by that same token, he's very reliant on the concept of money and power as virtuous and good and important to have. In the same way, I don't think we can just simply just develop this sort of counterculture where it's kind of like, guns ablaze, let's do what we want, and all the rest of it. Because I think we not only base our entire paradigms on the opposition to the systems that came before, thus creating no actual authentic experience of communication because you're just basing it on the opposite. But you also ignore your own prejudices. You also say, you know, like it's exactly the same thing with the protests in 2011 in London. Everyone is out protesting. And what do? They steal designer clothes, they steal TVs, they steal mobile phones. And this, you know, and it's this sort of false liberation that leads to these sorts of things, as opposed to sort of, I'm not saying that these aren't important, and you know these shouldn't happen. But I'm sort of saying that when we do just sort of we sort of jump right back into you know this oh well, you know, I can do what I want, so I'm going to still implicitly understand Nike and Adidas and Gap as very important social commodities, you know, or whatever, all what the rest of it is. And that's my that's definitely why I sort of think when we want to sort of create sort of authentic sort of revolutions and countercultures or whatever you want to call it, we need to sort of firmly place ourselves in authenticity and what we find actually valuable and things that can bring our experience. You know, does that make, yeah? And that's kind of something
it makes sense. But when it comes to like riots and looting and stuff,
yeah,
I feel like with your analysis you're missing the majority of the picture with it. In the 60s and 70s when the FBI and CIA and so on and so forth were struggling with, you know, the civil rights movement and struggling to keep it intact, struggling to keep their systems that they benefited from intact, which the civil rights movement threatened. They created COINTELPRO and assassinated Fred Hampton, the vice chairman of the Chicago chapter of the Black Panther Party.
Right.
They arrested Bobby Seale and killed Huey P. Newton as well.
Yeah.
Who are the two founders of the Black Panther Party.
Yeah.
Malcolm X was assassinated. Martin Luther King was assassinated, but only after he started talking about economic justice alongside racial justice.
Yeah.
And with that, it obliterated any concept of revolutionary or radical or even just black leadership that just slightly rocked the boat of the status quo.
Yeah.
So when riots and protests, such as in 2011, such as in last year, happen, and you know windows are broken, shops are looted, goods are stolen, buildings are burned down, nothing really comes of it because there's no central, well, not even central, there's no real organization that says this is our list of demands, this is going to keep happening until you meet them.
Yeah.
But also the looting aspect of civil unrests like this is multilateral, because when it comes to looting, it is a revolutionary tactic, is a tactic of protests, because destruction of property and theft of wealth and goods, it hurts the people who are it's in their best interest to continue the system that we live in right now and to not change it for the better. That it's their bottom line that's getting hurt by you stealing an iPhone, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I do completely agree with that. I suppose my only sort of thing that my only sort of advocation, or advocacy is the right word, when we sort of talk about these things, is these obviously, like, I'm not criticizing the civil rights movement or the Stonewall riots or the 2008 riots or anything like that. I think they're very important things to happen in the rest. All I'm saying is that we can't rely on that and say, oh, this is the answer. This is how we can change. This is how we can actually, like, change our sort of, consciousness of how we relate to certain people. And that's that is the that's what I sort of mean. I mean, we must revolt. We must not be so naive that the ways in which we do it at the present time are undeniably going to change everything and ultimately solve problems that we haven't even thought of in return, in terms of like again with the gangster sort of believing that still believing that money's virtuous and good, and people people stealing designer stuff, and in the sort of if there was a sort of belief that it was going to if it was primarily based on hurting the establishment, then that'd be great. I'm worried that obviously I'm not particularly criticizing these people or whatever and saying that they're bad actors. Like all I'm saying is I believe that a lot of their primary motivations was to just get free shit, and that's kind of that can be kind of it's fine. It's just something that, like, I'd like to see less of if we're thinking about sort of actual authentic anarchy and organization, and something we should perhaps sort of bring to our attention when we sort of think about how to rebel and how to protest. I'm quite a big fan of Extinction Rebellion in that sense, because I find that their organizational structure was much more kind of much more sort of based on demands and based on sort of community, as opposed to sort of as opposed to what it could have been. So yeah, and you squinted a bit, so I'd like to hear.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Extinction Rebellion, got to be honest. There's quite a few incidents of them at protests, calling the police on people of color, doing stuff like that, really shady shit like that.
Really?
I'm not a big fan of them. Yeah, I'll send you a couple links after this if you want. But also on the topic of looting and just going out to cause chaos and destroy some stuff and steal some stuff, I've got to be honest, I don't see a problem with it.
Neither do I.
I don't think it's really something that needs to be called out, like in Minecraft in a game. But like, these are people who, generally speaking, aren't from the wealthiest backgrounds and a lot of the time wouldn't really be able to afford this stuff anyway. They're priced out of the opportunity for ownership of these kinds of goods. And also, who are they really hurting? A lot of the time, who are they really hurting? That when there was, I think it was in 2011, when there was protests in 2011, and riots and looting, the police surrounded a Morrison's in London and gave no protection to small businesses. There's a reason why they did that, because
of course,
large chain shops are the first port of call when it comes to riots and looting, for good reason, because it's not just because they've got they've got the most stuff, the most valuable stuff. It's because the people who would be looting and rioting, one night, the next morning, they'd have to walk past the owners of the small businesses that they would have stolen shit from.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's another thing. A lot of buildings and a lot of businesses aren't owned by the people who live in the area. You know, it's something that someone said last year during the riots in America of the George Floyd murder, that, you know, it was a black woman. She was talking on camera about how people protesting and rioting were being criticized over burning a Target or burning the Baseball Hall of Fame building. It's like they don't own anything. They don't own any of the buildings, any of the property, any of the wealth in their area. So why do they care if a Target burns down?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh no, yeah, absolutely. I suppose yeah, absolutely. And again, like you know, as I said, like I'm completely, I'm not calling these people out at all. I suppose what I'm doing is I'm just sort of you've given me a lot of food for thought actually when sort of thinking about this. I suppose I'm just sort of I suppose I'm sort of advocating kind of for us to be, you know, to sort of conjure up new ways to be sort of more experimentative with our process, you know, and but obviously this is not down to me, and I really believe that you know, people have the right to do things as they wish, you know, and that should be like, you know, that sort of freedom should be the backbone of sort of pretty much all human social engagement. I suppose I'm just sort of interested in experimenting with in what ways we protest and in what ways we actually attack to both sort of meet our sort of desires and our demands and to question the actual status quo. And I just sort of wonder like whether we you know, whether we get to the core of a lot of issues by burning a Target down. Not that this isn't pragmatic, it's just in terms of like when, you know, at the end of the day, we still burn down a Target and go spend our US dollars somewhere else. This is my, or, you know, we you know, yeah, and there are probably other examples I could conjure up, but that one stands out a lot. This has been really fun. It's been good. It's nice to see your face again. It's been a while, so I think it was last summer that we saw each other.
Nice to see you too. It's been literally months.
It's been nearly a year now. I think the last time. I think the last time we met was at the Lees, and you met
September.
You met a couple. You met a couple of my friends, like you know, Enya, and there's some people that I won't mention too much, but just because you know I want to protect them or whatever. But yeah, this has been really fun, Jeffrey. Thanks so much for coming. It's been really interesting, really, you know, challenging my ideas as well, which I always like. And you know, I think we've had a really interesting conversation. And thanks for everyone for watching. If you liked what you saw, please check out our other videos. I think this is number 11 or number 10 or number 12. It's one of those things in the episode ranking. In the episode back catalog. If you, please leave a comment. Tell us what you enjoyed. Tell us what you would like to see more of in terms of, you know, style as well as actual content. You know, like I said, we at Libernet mainly, we are a project dedicated to putting a library on the blockchain and sort of revolutionizing the publishing industry. And if you want to support the channel, like the video, share it with people that you think might really enjoy this, and subscribe and hit the bell and all of that, and follow us on Twitter at Books on Chain. So thanks again, Jeffrey. Hope you have a lovely weekend. We'll go for that. We'll go for a pub garden drink when we're allowed to at some point.
When I'm vaccinated.
When you're vaccinated.
I'm not a big fan of going out and doing social stuff until I know, you know.
Absolutely. Well, you know, it can be like a walk in a Budweiser, whatever. Whatever. And thanks everyone for watching. It's been fun. So thanks very much, guys. Enjoy your weekend. All right. There we go.